they will send you to prison, or in Trump's case, and I've warned about this, assassination. So I said, if you're not prepared to go to prison, if you're not prepared to sacrifice your life, you're in the wrong line of work. This is all-out political warfare between two sides of the United States that can't stand each other. Each side thinks they think we're barbarians. We think they've destroyed the country. We think they're dangerous. They think that we're beyond dangerous.
In Donald Trump's first 2 weeks in office, he began a program of mass deportations, fired top FBI officials, ended DEI across the government, cut billions of dollars in wasteful spending, laid off tens of thousands of government workers, and ended temporary protected status for hundreds of thousands of illegal aliens. My name is Steven Edginton, and joining me to discuss the first few weeks of the second Trump administration is Stephen K. Bannon. Are we witnessing a campaign of revenge?
A campaign of revenge by the president? I think anything but. Remember, his revenge is going to be the new golden age. I think what you're seeing is a very focused deconstruction of the administrative state and take down the deep state. We call it days of thunder here. And folks should understand that President Trump's political comeback started the day he got back to Mar-a-Lago with the war room and the war room posse and this kind of grassroots effort that turned into the precinct strategy and had his back the whole time. That's the political side, which most people think is everything. But the other side was these public intellectuals, America First Party Institute under Brooks Rollins and Stephen Miller, America First Law under Miller, Center for Renewing America under Russ Vought, the infamous Project 2025, but that was to look at verticals of everything we wanted to accomplish, drill deep into policy, and to start to put together teams. Remember, we can hit the deck plates running with 4,000. There's 4,000 people to control a government that is about 10 million employees. That's 2.5 million civilian bureaucrats, 2.5 million military, about 5 million contractors at some sort of executive level. So it's about 10 million that controls a budget of $6.5 trillion a year in assets of, I don't know, 75, 80 trillion. So it's massive. And they've been working for years. And now you're seeing the days of thunder. Every day there's, 5 executive orders, 10 more executive actions, legislation that's started or signed, all types of other activity, everything from freeing hostages to freeing the guys who are down in Venezuela, the people that went down there to try to free the people in Venezuela. So everything across the board. So it's not revenge. It's really setting things right. The American people kind of demanded this. They voted for it, and they're getting it.
What I find incredible is the lack of opposition in the last 2 weeks. What happened to the resistance?
I think you see, I want to make it the analogy kind of the Tory party to the Reform Party. In the established order, they get so lazy because they control the levers of power. They control the financial community, or the financial community. So it's the financial community, the tech community, the corporatist, the universities, pop culture, high culture, media, and they get lazy. I am not shocked. I am surprised at how quickly the ideas are evaporating. What I mean by that, when you say no resistance, let's break it down in pieces. Number one, in the confirmation hearings, and we just had Tulsi and Bobby Kennedy approved, which they said was never going to happen. After we got Pete Hegseth approved, they said it was never going to happen. If you go back and your audience looks at the confirmation hearings, Marco Rubio is laying out the end of the post-war international rules-based order. Pete Hegseth is talking about a revolution in military affairs. Russ Vought and really Scott Bessent are talking about a new economic model for the United States based on external revenue. Look at this thing, what we call the golden door, the golden market. Huge ideas put out on this Trump revolution, what he calls a revolution of common sense. There's no pushback. There's people going after the personal shortcomings or foibles of these individuals, but there's no pushback, virtually no pushback on the ideas, and ideas have consequences. Then if you look at the resistance in the streets, a lot of this, remember, it's how it's financed. This is why USAID is so important. So we're choking down and cutting off the oxygen because this hasn't really been financed by a lot of private groups. That money's all been slush fund through the government. So when you talk about resistance at every level, they've been shattered. They've been shattered from their financing sources. The media is kind of is just almost like a puppy now because their audience has collapsed. And one of the reasons their audience collapsed, they lied to them the entire time about how they were going to win. So at every level where there would be resistance, there's just been an absolute collapse. On top of that, the Democrats, because as I've been saying for a long time, they're ruled kind of from this octogenarian group. Those people refuse to turn over power. The committee heads, they had a protest yesterday, and the committee heads of the Democrats are all, white guys in their 70s and their 80s that don't even, can't communicate with a young audience. So no, it's been shattered. It will come back as it thinks through, but the resistance to Trump 2.0 has been less than the resistance of the Tories to Nigel Reform's Reform Party. And that's kind of hard to believe since it looks like there's been almost no resistance to that. So you are where you are. And I think my theory of the case of flood the zone and give them all pedal, no brake. It's just attack, 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 keep driving it, flood the zone, overwhelm them. It gets to be a psychological thing. They don't even know what to choose and picking. You see it by the coverage. They're overwhelmed. They don't know where to turn. They don't have the normal levers of power they could grab. And so they're kind of adrift.
Who do you think should be on the top target list of the Trump DOJ?
Well, first, I think we have to go back. I'm a huge advocate that radical transparency and declassification is our best friend. I think just in the Trump era, we have to go back to the beginning. And I'm a very strong advocate that DOJ can handle this because they got so much going on. To really make sure that we never go through another period of weaponization, I think a special prosecutor overall has to do it. And the special prosecutor then goes back to even before Trump was president. You go back to Crossfire Hurricane. You go back to Cambridge. You go back to MI6 involvement. You go back to the Five Eyes involvement in all this. You're going to have to go in some places that people don't want to go, but it has to happen. We have to find out about the intelligence community overall. You have to go back to the Russia hoax, all of that. You have to go back to then the stolen election. You have to go back to J6 to get to the bottom of that. And then the vast criminal conspiracy against President Trump to indict him 92 times on charges that just on the Jack Smith stuff alone would be 300 years in a federal prison because they wanted him to die in federal prison. The reason they were so over the top, your audience should miss the point, they never thought we would be back. They thought we were finished. We can put Bannon in prison, Navarro in prison, we can prison Trump. They're finished. It was the exact opposite. And that's one of the reasons that they're so shocked and so not organized in the resistance. They just got lazy, right? And didn't work the big muscles, didn't do the reps you need like in sports to be on top of things. In addition to all that happening, I think further investigations have to go on the pandemic. Further investigations have to go of how we had this, of the invasion of our country, very organized, who paid for it, who did it. So to me, there's a massive series of investigations we have to have so the American people can fully understand how the apparatus came about, how it's weaponized, and then how is it used against the American people and everything like the pandemic to things like the invasion of our country. So I think these are massive investigations. If I felt confident that Congress could do it in an organized way with public hearings, I would be the first to advocate that, and maybe it's dual track. But I believe you have to have a grand jury, you have to have high levels of evidence, and all this has to be made public. But I think this goes on for years, and to me, it's one of the most important things we could do. It has to happen, or we're not going to have a country. Just us winning and changing fundamentally things, the Administrative State you have to go, the cancer is in the body, it's metastasizing. Now we're here stopping it on the Administrative State, on the deep state, but you got to go back to the source of the disease and really not just cut it out, but actually understand and study it of how it happened and who's responsible. And I think there's going to be a lot of people that go to prison. I mean, I think a lot of people are going to go to prison for many, many years.
Just before Biden left office, he issued a series of pardons to his allies, preemptive pardons and so on. Do you think that those should still apply? Is there any way of getting around those pardons?
It's a quite fascinating topic. I believe Biden waited too long because he's trying to be cute and don't want to too wit. People were walking into the Capitol for the inauguration, and at noon is when you traditionally take the oath around noon. So officially the term ends at noon on the 20th. People were walking in at close to 11 o'clock and they're announcing pardons. This is how ashamed they were of the pardons for the family, et cetera. I find it ironic since I went to a federal prison and I didn't go to a camp. I went to a prison. I went to a cell block and a cell in a 800-man prison that has 1,200 prisoners because of overcrowding. The people that put me there are who thought I would never return and never come back. Nancy Pelosi has kind of been kicked to the curb because all the older Democrats are looked at as feckless. But the J6 committee went begging for pardons. This is unheard of. They approached the White House and put huge pressure on Biden to give them preemptive blanket pardons, which we don't even know is legal. It's never happened in the United States except one technical time on Nixon. And Nixon really had a House Judiciary Committee that was about to issue criminal indictments on him. So it wasn't like he didn't, they had a process that went on for over a year. Nixon knew specifically what he was going to be charged with when this happened, or relevant thing. So it wasn't a blanket preemptive pardon. It was kind of done to make sure he had a deal. They guaranteed it to him so he'd get out of the White House and they could go on with their life. This is totally different. The people that put me in prison for a misdemeanor for 4 months, which also people understand, in a federal prison, the prison I was in is over 100 years old, has never had a misdemeanor. One of the wardens and one of the guys there told me one time they couldn't find a misdemeanor in the federal system. Our prisons are so overcrowded, they don't even have room for the felons. So those people, Liz Cheney and Benny Thompson, the people that went after Trump and gave criminal referrals on Trump that Jack Smith then lined up for 300 years in prison, crimes for 300 years in prison on Trump, and sent Peter Navarro to prison and sent 1,000 J6 people to prison. These people then went begging for a pardon for what they had done. And I'm going, whoa, what they done can't stand up underneath scrutiny. So number one, I think technically, and I've been a big advocate of this, that the Justice Department should not effectuate any of those, or we've got to go another route because we are going to hold these people accountable. This is going to be a massive part of the investigation of the vast criminal conspiracy, not just against President Trump and not just the people but what actually went on. I have no time and no burning place in my heart for revenge. What I have is that this can never happen again. Fortunately, I happen to be a tough enough Mick that I could get through it 70 years old, 4 months in prison, which is not easy. These prisons are quite dangerous because of the drugs, okay, and the violence that comes from the drugs. It's really for the J6 people and others and people that don't have my financial resources or kind of, cussedness, that they have to be protected. We can never allow this to happen again. I know so many people are saying if they went to prison, they'd be shattered for what they had to have. The J6 people were so arrogant, so cocky in Justice Department because they never thought Trump's people were coming back, and now they're petrified. And I hear that Jack Smith's team is quite upset that they didn't get pardons. I will just tell them, lawyer up. You might want to check countries that don't have treaties with the United States, right? You might want to look at living the rest of your life there because investigations are going to happen. We cannot, and President Trump has no time for this. He's doing his thing, but there are people around him. And you can already see with the people going to the Justice Department, Emil Bovee has just been a superstar of the last 3. He's the number 3 guy. The people around President Trump that Boris Epstein put in there are extraordinary. So folks in England should understand, we're going to have things like this are going to happen every day, but there's going to be a massive investigation side that's not driven by Trump, but driven by other people, so we can make sure that this never happens again in our republic.
Are you satisfied that you're not going to go to prison again? Because I know there was a case in New York against you. Obviously, you're not protected.
No, I don't think I will go to. It's a totally trumped up charge. When they built the wall, it went from saying, "Oh, he stole $22 million," and they did it from all people in Manhattan. They just in a court filing or in court a month ago, they said it's about $50,000 that I gave to the veteran that had no legs on money that they were paying me to do all the organizational effort I did around the wall. So now I'm very confident that I won't go to jail again. But you know what? It's an Alvin Bragg. We now know that USAID money went to back Soros to back this. These are all rigged. It's the same situation that gave President Trump, found him guilty of 34 felonies. So you can't get a fair trial. You know that. And they would put President Trump in. If he had not won on November 5th, your audience should understand President Trump would have been in, they would have tried to put him in prison for a decade just in New York City. So this is dangerous. It's so rigged. And we're seeing people now start to reject it. But no, I feel highly confident that that won't happen. But I tell people, don't think this is, unless we take this out root and branch now. This could always come up in the future. And I tell people when they first come in, they want to be in leadership roles. Do this. I said, listen, you got to do a deep you got to do a deep check here, because we're going up against the established order that controls the most powerful nation in the history of the earth. They will send you to prison, or in Trump's case, and I've warned about this, assassination. So I said, if you're not prepared to go to prison, if you're not prepared to sacrifice your life, you're in the wrong line of work. This is all-out political warfare between two sides of the United States that can't stand each other. Each side thinks we're barbarians. We think they've destroyed the country. We think they're dangerous. They think that we're beyond dangerous. There's no love lost here between others. And look what they did to President Trump. And now that we're in charge, we owe it to this country. And here's what I tell people. Just get the facts out. What helps us every time there's more facts that come out, because now look what's happening. Ratcliffe gets to the CIA, and in 2 days, first day, well, guess what? The CIA actually did agree. He released, the CIA did agree that the virus came from the Wuhan lab. What did War Room say on, I don't remember, January 20th of 2020? We came out with that first, and we were taken off all platforms. We were deplatformed because this is conspiracy theory. Now we know the CIA had information. The next day, Ratcliffe leaked out that, hey, the Chinese Communist Party, since the PLA controlled the lab, maybe either inadvertently leaked on their watch, or they might have even released it on purpose. So my point is, I want to declassify 5 million documents right now. I want to have radical transparency in all of these court hearings, including, we're a huge believer that General Milley must be recalled to active duty. He must go before a military tribunal under the laws of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, which is different than civilian law here. General Milley has to be tried for treason, because I believe he's guilty of treason, but that has to be done in a fair and equitable way. But I think that has to be done now. And so you're going to see people around President Trump and people in the MAGA movement that have these platforms that are quite powerful, really putting pressure on that we got to drive this one and continue to do it. And people should understand, I'm a huge advocate of releasing documentation of what MI6 and the CIA have been doing for years. The British people are not paying, didn't know they were paying for this. The American people didn't know they were paying for this. This is not acceptable. It's very much like when the Church Commission came up in the 70s, because the CIA, we had no House Intelligence Committee. We had no Senate Intelligence Committee. The CIA had been out of control. We found out in that all the involvement they had in assassinations in sub-Saharan, in Africa and in Latin America, and they didn't even want to touch their involvement in assassinations here in the United States of either Martin Luther King or Bobby Kennedy or Jack Kennedy and or others, right? Their involvement. And so I believe in massive declassification and massive radical transparency.
Now, let me put the Democrats' view of the first 2 weeks to you, and I want you to react. So this was in the New York Times. Senator Tim Kaine, describing Trump's first 2 weeks, said it reminded him of his time when he lived in Honduras during a military dictatorship in the 1980s. He said it's like watching Putin or Berlusconi, which is a bit of an odd comparison to the Italian Prime Minister. They also say that Elon Musk has far too much power. He's a billionaire who has lots of government contracts, has conflicts of interest. They also say that President Trump is abusing his executive power, and he should be going through Congress for doing all sorts of things that he's doing using executive orders and so on. So are we seeing Trump the dictator? Is this an abuse of power?
Ideas have consequences. The ideas of our revolutionary generation and our framers had big consequences for your audience. Remember, we were one of the founding elements with India of what was going to be a superpower empire, and our revolutionary generation specifically opted out because they saw what a landed aristocracy or what an oligarchy could contaminate commons, right? Which they felt commons was crooked, and also give monopolistic power to, like, the British East India Company. And our revolutionary generation, who, remember, would have financially benefited because they were lawyers and real estate speculators and merchants. Some might call them freebooters.
Tax dodgers.
Well, because they had a definition of, they had difference of opinion of external revenues versus their money. But those ideas had massive consequences that eventually led to a break in a military break that we had to win our freedom on a battlefield after 8 years. Here you're seeing, and I want to make sure your audience understands this. There is, as President Trump was in these years of what I call the lion in winter, and what the Republican establishment would make sure they would go to Mar-a-Lago to make sure the lion was in the cage. We were sitting there going, hey, we're working every day on the political side at the grassroots level and also helping guide these institutions that are doing the hard work of policy and building teams and networks to make sure that when he returns, because he's thought this through a lot, that we have muzzle velocity to drive this through and accomplish what we want to accomplish that we authoritative to in the first time. One of these is a big idea. It's called the unitary theory of the executive. Now, before Dick Cheney got into things with Congress and what President Trump thinks quite different. And this is where you see Russ Vought and Mike Davis and Mark Paoletta and others that are some of the lawyers and the constitutional lawyers involved in this. The unitary theory says by our Constitution, the president has three roles as defined. Number one, he's the chief executive officer of the U.S. government. Number two, he's the commander-in-chief of the uniformed services, the military. And the third, which I never want to talk about, he's the chief magistrate and chief law enforcement officer of the government. Now, since Watergate, and Watergate was really a legal coup against Nixon, not so much CIA was involved, other people were involved, the Woodward Bernstein, the media, but it was really Judge Sirica, a federal judge, working with lawyers on the House impeachment committee, also working with lawyers in the DOJ that we now know did much of what they've been trying to do with President Trump. And so they hate the fact that the Justice Department, the FBI, has been hermetically sealed, and these progressive left globalists have run it at detriment to any Republican administration. And although most Republican administrations didn't go hard at all, they would be batted back immediately. And even President Trump, we were thwarted in year one. So in the unified theory, as chief executive, he's sitting there saying, hey, they give me pretty open field running in the Constitution about my Article 2 powers, to wit, and what Kane's talking about a lot is about the money that gets allocated or appropriated is a law. But for instance, if there's $300 billion in a green, he calls it a green new scam that's still there and a law has been passed, and he thinks that they can show that it hasn't been used properly or it's unspent, he believes that the Constitution says the appropriation is a ceiling, and he has the ability to go back and redirect it. He also thinks he has the ability with Elon Musk as an outside advisor when they highlight something like USAID and say this is really a CIA cutout. It's the money's supposed to be for development, helping people, philanthropy. We actually know it's a CIA cutout, and it's been funding, as we showed on War Room, it's been funding the invasion through the NGOs, the invasion on the southern border. Oh, by the way, it's also been funding all types of media suppression and online suppression to suppress the MAGA movement and President Trump's followers in the United States, including deplatforming people like my show. Then he feels that he can say, hey, I'm going to zero this out and Congress has got to catch up with me. On the military side, he feels, hey, I can send Pete Hegseth to the border, my Secretary of Defense, to the border with 1,500 troops to protect the national security, right? And I can do that, and I will do it. He also says, hey, I can recall Milley back to uniform and have him put on trial for treason. On the other side, he's saying, hey, the FBI, I can redo the FBI, I can restructure the Justice Department, and you're not going to stop me, right? Because I am the chief executive, I'm president of the United States. This is why Kane and these elite globalists are in shock. I mean, your first question about they're not ready, this is kind of their bleeding right now. They're writing op-eds in the Wall Street Journal. They're writing op-eds in the New York Times. I got a news flash for them. Op-eds in the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal are not going to hack it. If that's what you're going to bring, you're bringing a knife to a gunfight, okay? Because this is a confrontation. This is what I'm saying, Days of Thunder. President Trump is, over this whole vertical, is hitting them every day with 10, 15, 20 executive actions and executive orders. I feel we have the best handle on it. And I tell guys, there's a dozen things we can't even cover today because we got to focus on the 3 or 4 most major ones. So this is a direct confrontation. Heads up to folks in England. If you are to ever take your country back, your first step was Brexit. But if you're ever to take your country back because you saw what the established order, because I sat with Theresa May in this crowd when they came over, they saw Brexit as a problem and they didn't want to deal with it. You then saw Boris Johnson, that his idea was to have it as Singapore on the Thames, right? Was to basically do a deal with like the oligarchs in the city of London and the tech oligarchs in Cambridge and have the same problem on a smaller scale of the United States. When the Reform Party and others come together, when you go after to actually try to take the apparatus apart and try to have it respond to the British people, you're going to have, it's going to be a smaller scale, but it'll be just as intense. Your day's coming. Either that or you'll never get your freedom back. And you're seeing right here, it's going to get ugly. And I can understand why Kane and those guys think it is an authoritarian thing. My point is, you're taking us to court. You're using the court systems. You can't pass legislation because you're not in the majority of the thing, but you can still get up there and use the bully pulpit. You still have all the media, although they've been kind of shattered by new media and the podcast, right? And the things like the GB Newses of the world. You've been shattered by that, but you still have all those tools. If you have an argument that people believe, and this is my point to our side, radical transparency. The more information you put out, the American people go, I didn't know that. I'm paying for that. This is why we're $2 trillion. Radical transparency, radical declassification of these documents never should be classified because it's classified to make sure the globalists and the elitists can do it. So Tim Kaine's going to have many more bad days in front of him. They've already suing us everywhere from the deportations to every step President Trump does. They're trying to stop it. We're powering through it. And here's what's so great is President Trump is so kowtowed. The Republican establishment's kowtowing to them. And so that now you're seeing him as a man in full. He is full on and everything's a jackhammer and there's no resistance on our side, which there traditionally was. To wit, some of the guys on the internet have been saying, hey, House Freedom Caucus, the feckless nature of the limited government conservatives, House Freedom Caucus, they went after USAID for 10 years and never got anything. I said, guys, Eli Crane, Matt Gaetz, these guys would say in the middle of the night in these heated debates with the appropriations committees, and we would do it, we would cover it live, and we'd have thousands of people watching it. They put the case for it that we're putting today that Elon Musk is using to say this has to be shut down. And the Republicans, it wouldn't even get to the vote of the Democrats. The Republican establishment by 2/3, 1/3 would say, no, we're going to do it. The controlled opposition, just like the Tories, would go along to get along. That is changing. President Trump has them so shocked that right now they're totally quiet and letting President Trump do what he has to do.
There's a famous clip of you describing conservatives in a very rude way, using very rude words.
It's not rude. It
begins with P, but we won't.
No, it's pusillanimous. Listen, for your audience, you guys know this in England. Your country didn't get all screwed up because the conservatives were in power for 12 years. Good God, you had the Tories. Look what happened. Look on immigration. Look at all the money you put in Ukraine. Everything that could have been done, particularly after Brexit, to basically make Britain great again, to make the United Kingdom great, to reinvest money, to make sure that right now, because financially, economically, outside of kind of the city of London and Greater London, because it is a little bit of Thames on the Thames, at Singapore and the Thames. The rest of the hinterland's kind of a third world country. You look at economics, it's not right. You could have redone that. You had conservative government, and this is why I say, it's not Republicans or Democrats. It's not Tories or Labor. It's not conservatives or liberals or progressives. Those are all old, that misdirected. It is populist nationalists that believe in the citizens of the country and the country itself. And what they must focus on is what's best for the country and what's best for the citizens of the country. Or you have these elite globalists. And they're saying you have nothing more than a hammered down version in your country and if you don't thwart that, and toss it. And I said conservatives in our country are pussies. They've gone along for this forever. We didn't get in this situation. They were controlled opposition. Remember, since Nixon's time or since Lyndon Johnson, we've controlled the White House more times. We've controlled the legislation more times. How did we get to $36 trillion in debt? How did we get to $2 trillion deficits every year? How did we end up spending trillions of dollars in Afghanistan and Iraq? It just wasn't all progressive Democrats. The quote unquote Republican Party, the established order, had most to do with this.
Well, Reagan famously gave amnesty to illegal migrants, and I think you could very much criticize him and Nixon as well for not reversing the LBJ.
Let's he's a perfect example that you bring this up. The two things that happened for Reagan, I want to be specific about this, on Middle East wars and immigration. He was sold a whole package that everything that was going to be done and we would never have this problem again in the late 1980s by Ted Kennedy and guys in his own party. There will be absolute border security. The border will be secured. This will never happen again. It was terrible it happened. And if you do this, and it's like 3 million people overall, this will never happen again. They lied to him. What they did is the amnesty first, and they never did the enforcement. This shows you the capitalist and the political class they want to invade everywhere and invite everybody in. For the capitalist, right, the business community in Wall Street, of course they want as much illegal alien as possible. It drives down wages among unskilled workers. This is why all of our visa programs are all funny. We have no really legitimate immigration in this country. It's all a con to get cheap labor in here to compete against American citizens. President Reagan, and I think he said later he would have never done the deal. The people around him said, hey, you got hoodwinked, and he wasn't happy about it because they were committed people on the Republican side that were done. They never enforced anything. Also, about involvement in Mideast wars, remember, the Tehran or the Persians gave over our hostages, which is a young naval officer in the workup. I had been in the Persian Gulf, in the North Arabian Sea, in the carrier battle groups, preparing for the Carter invasion, right? I wasn't there when the invasion took place, but the invasion was a debacle. And as a young naval officer in the training, I could tell you it was not going to turn out well because the plan itself was kind of half-baked. You never saw Reagan press that after those hostages came home. And when he was talked into putting troops into Beirut, they got blown up in the biggest terrorist attack we'd had till 9/11, the Beirut massacre. And he told Capricorn, get him out of here. I'm focused on the evil empire. I got to stay focused on the evil empire. So it shows you the apparatus, and particularly the Bush faction that was in, the globalist faction that was in and poisoned particularly the latter years of President Reagan, about how insidious they are and what they will do once they get their control of power.
You talk about the globalists, and I want to mention a few people who might be viewed as globalists to some. Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, even Elon Musk, who is very much in favor of H-1B visas, bringing in.
He's trying to convince me. He's trying to convince me as a populist nationalist. I said.
Right. Well, I'm saying to you that perhaps they're not. Right. So
first, okay, stop.
So why are they surrounded? Why is President Trump surrounded himself with people who are globalists? If you saw the, and I realize now why he did it inside. Yes, it was cold. But it was beautifully shot. It had TV lighting, and it was like he wanted to recreate the deck of the battleship Missouri in Tokyo Harbor in 1945 with MacArthur there taking and Admiral Nimitz taking the surrender of the Imperial High Command. Those were the oligarchs that essentially come to sign a surrender document. Okay, they had opposed President Trump in the first term in 16 campaign. In the first term, they fought a separate way. All of these, except for Elon, and I'll get to that in a second. Every one of these guys that was on display, it was like a display case. Right? It was like Teddy Roosevelt would go big game hunting and have like a water buffalo from the Amazon. He had them right there front and center. He wanted the whole world to see it. He wanted the whole world to see that they're supplicants of Trump who they try to defeat. We'll talk about their influence over time, but that was number one. I beat these guys. They're here kissing my ass. They're coming to Mar-a-Lago with their little $1 million checks and all this stuff. They want to be best friends. For your audience, their Damascene moment was about 11 o'clock on the evening, Eastern Standard Time, on the evening of 5 November when Pennsylvania went. When Pennsylvania went and Trump won the presidency, all these guys were on the road to Damascus. They all realized they really weren't progressive Democrats that were in partnership to suppress the MAGA movement and suppress either debank it, deplatform it, you figure it out. They were actually populist nationalists. They had the revelation, and they couldn't wait to get to Mar-a-Lago. The key thing, and this is how good President Trump is, psychologically, he's playing at a different level than everybody else. When he had Zuckerberg come down, because Zuckerberg's the most afraid because he sees Bannon on the show every day. He's a criminal. We got to try him. Zuckerberg goes down. It's a whole new look. He's broed out. He's cut. He's in a T-shirt. He's got this like wig on his weird hair. It's not the weird nerd you saw before. He's like a weirder UFC nerd. He puts a UFC guy on his board. He's broing out going to these fights. He's trying to be like a guy, right? It's still Zuckerberg, the nerd, but he's trying to be a guy. He goes down and gives the check. Trump does what Trump does best. He lets the guy go out and says, hey, Trump invited me to the inauguration and I'm going. Once that hit,
there was a floodgate. You saw every corporate CEO and all these tech bros. They said, "I better get to Mar-a-Lago and pay homage, right, and try to get to the inauguration." President Trump played it particularly, but these people are all progressive Democrats. They're all globalists. They're all oligarchs, and they're techno feudalists because they don't really believe in the democratic process. Okay, these guys are all the wealthiest guys in the world. They're quite dangerous. And I think it's all got to be broken up by, I'm a neo-Brandesian when it comes to antitrust here, that I'm not as worried about the consumer prices and that, which is obviously a concern. I'm concerned about concentrations of power, particularly concentration of power where you combine private power with governmental power. I think that's really...
Isn't that Elon Musk, private power and government power? And that's the concerns that people have raised.
I think in Musk's case, it's quite... Listen, I've been the biggest critic of Elon Musk, but I've also been his biggest supporter. And I know people don't see the support side. Number one, and this is his engineering mind at work, because he is an engineer. In my interactions with him, he doesn't think like other people. He comes at everything in a mathematical and engineering. He came up and backed our play. And folks got to understand, and this is very important in British politics, is that the pressure around Trump is always to moderate. The pressure on Trump is not to be the savage. The pressure on Trump is not to be like we like him, right? Don't give two Fs. Let's just roll, because that's what the people want. And it's always this thing, the biggest thing they try getting to moderate on is to go after the mythic suburban woman. If you just tone it down, there's a whole group of mythic suburban women out there that are going to come your way. And I say that's ridiculous. We have the MAHA, the Make America Healthy Again moms, but they're the cutting edge of a new political movement. That's not the traditional suburban mom. Elon Musk understood that this theory of the case, that you had this MAGA movement and this election would be a MAGA plus, that you had the MAGA base that had President Trump's back, plus you had low information, low propensity voters that were out there in the hinterland, but you got to go dig those out, and they will vote for Trump. And the other plus was that you had a little bit of these tech bros that could come along, right? They don't bring a lot of votes, but it's a lot of media attention. And you had the Make America Healthy Again mothers. Those mothers that have been awakened or red-pilled, mainly Obama voters, that have been red-pilled during the pandemic and now are at the cutting edge of this kind of, anti-Department of Health, anti-Fauci group that we could get. He backed that play. And how did he back that play? He put $250 million cash money in 5 months. When people talk about the United States and about the amount of billionaires putting in money, always remember, when you talk about the Adelsons putting 100 million, or some people put 100 million, that's normally over a cycle. That's a 4-year cycle. Elon Musk wrote $250 million worth of checks in 5 months to back the ground game, not fancy commercials, but really the ground game. All that professional layer you had to put in on the self-organizing effort, plus the data. And it's what I think, no doubt, was a massive part of the, not just taking the presidency, but also holding the House and taking the Senate, and particularly piercing the blue wall. And Elon, when he went on stage all the time, was also all the time talking about the precinct strategy, talking about canvassing, talking about get out the vote, talking about those nuts and bolt things about how Trump wins. Number two, I've been kind of the father of this concept of deconstructing the administrative state. I came up in 2017 and said, we have to take out this bureaucracy. Later, I saw how the deep state part of it tried to destroy Trump, and I said, this thing's got to go. Doge coming in is kind of what you need. We have an official government part of that, the Office of Management and Budget, but they're kind of limited in their impact of what someone like Elon can bring, plus the engineering expertise, and that's what he's done. What he's done so far, he's doing a line diagram on literally the U.S. government, which surprisingly, it's quite complicated to know how it works. His whole memo from OMB, the OMB memo, was to find out where in this vast system the cash is. And we know there's $5 trillion going out. And now we realize it's in every House district, it's Meals on Wheels, it's Head Start, it's after school programs, it's Medicaid, it's everywhere. His second part, and this is where it got even more controversial, is he said, hey, that's where the money is. I have to be where the checks are written, where it comes from a authorization of Congress to actually Treasury sending the cash into your account. That's what, over the weekend, he's basically got a team in there. Now, Scott Bess, I know very well, saying they have read-only ability. They don't have the ability to really stop checks. They don't have the ability to actually redo checks. but he's adding benefit to the fact of USAID, which is so controversial. It's $50 billion a year. So it's huge in the grand scheme of cutting a deficit. It's not going to solve our problem, but he identified that, and he worked with people to actually shut it down and freeze and make sure nobody could get into the building until they figure it out. So President Trump has this authorization in the Constitution. If the Democrats don't think so, go to court. They've already gone to court, and we'll see how these lawsuits play out. And Elon is an advisor and a consultant. I agree that there's going to be issues about data. There's going to be issues about personal information that has to be hermetically sealed by the department in charge, whether it's vested in Treasury, whether it's rush vote over at OMB. I'm sure those things are being done. President Trump's obviously very concerned about that too. President Trump just came out and said, hey, the guy does what I want him to do. And if he comes to an idea I don't like, I don't do it. So I'm in charge, right? He just said this on the tarmac yesterday. He said it in another, I think, interview last night. He says, I'm in charge. This guy's not co-president. He's an advisor. He's doing good work. And where I don't think it's good, I won't let him do it. So in that case, and remember, I have big issues with Elon Musk.
Well, I was going to ask, just very, very quickly, just to clarify, do you think he is a globalist or not?
Oh, he's definitely a globalist, no doubt. There's no doubt he's a globalist.
So he's trying to persuade you otherwise, you said?
I think that if you see on his profile on Twitter, I think he's trying to. And look,
he's retweeting you a lot, I see.
He put a segment up we had with Michael Benz last night, because when somebody's doing something positive, I'm the first to give him credit. Like I said, I gave Elon credit for those first two things when other people wouldn't. I'm the first one that went out there and said, hey, this guy's added a lot of value. I'm also the one, given all my work, the third element, all my work in Europe, and particularly with Brexit, with Nigel Farage, I was the first one to say, hey, Elon, particularly Alternative for Deutschland, and I adamantly opposed what he said about Nigel because it's not true. I think Nigel's true. But, even Nigel and I'm a huge supporter of Tommy Robinson. And I've gotten a lot of grief. We, with Raheem Kassam and really at Breitbart, we drove that story for years. It was Breitbart, and Nigel's very upfront. That's not for me. I don't think that's a way for us to basically take over the Tory party. He has a different view of it. He's clearly the leader. We're just media guys. I've committed to go to Tommy when he gets out. I've always been close to Tommy. Raheem's put on tributes and rallies for Tommy. Tommy's got some rough edges, right? No doubt about it. But the fight that he had at its core was to tell a truth that we had to face, particularly about certain elements of radical Islam and certain elements about Islamic society that just can't be tamped down. He did it. Now, what I didn't like is Elon, to get away from the conversation he was losing here on HB1 visas and people saying, hey, I thought you were a nationalist, now I see you're a globalist. He went there and tried to blow up Nigel. But my guidance to Europe is the following. This guy has the two tactical nuclear weapons of modern politics. He has unlimited money. And when I say unlimited money, he is a guy that could write a $250 million check in 5 months and it doesn't affect his lifestyle. Okay? I don't know of anybody else in the world that could do that. Number two, he has a powerful social media platform and he can bind what he binds and he can loose what he looses. He can put you up and make you a rock star, or he can bury you in the basement, because he's not a free speech absolutist at all. He can bury you in the basement and never to be seen again. There's not a centrist or center-left government in all the continent that could withstand the onslaught of an Elon Musk that backed a populist party. And I think you're going to see, we're going to have a first test with Alternative for Deutschland. I think you're going to see it. But the people in the United Kingdom and people in the continent ought to know that I believe this guy's going to be in your life and you're going to have to deal with it. Now here, we're having a big fight with him about this. It's not just about H-1B visas. It's about the central beating heart of the economic model of the apartheid state of Silicon Valley, which is American labor is too expensive, right? American labor is not compliant. They got an attitude because they're Americans, right? And they're citizens. So we want labor, particularly in algorithmic companies, which most of these are, labor's the whole cost. So we want labor that costs 50% less. And we want labor that's totally compliant to these outrageous demands we make of the length of time they work and what they have to do. And the way they do that is by importing not more skilled labor. That's the lie. It's not even as skilled. Lower skilled tech workers to come in and undercut the American labor. And they do this across the board. This is not about bringing genes. This is not bringing Einsteins in. We have a program to bring Einstein. We brought in 1,200 German rocket scientists post-war up into the Mercury program, of tens, if not hundreds of thousands of engineers that were working on those programs, and we brought 1,200. There's room in the United States to bring in the best if you have to bring, although I disagree with that. I think that makes us an imperial power. I want the best to go back to their homes and make their own countries get great again, and we will work with them on that. But even in the regard that you have to have the Einsteins, there's ways to do it and cut out all these scams on the visa situation.
Well, I'm sure Elon would support the rocket scientists. I want to ask one more question about the US, or couple more questions about the US, then we'll move on to Britain. So Vivek tweeted over Christmas, Vivek Ramaswamy, for far too long, at least since the 1990s and probably longer, our American culture has valued mediocrity over excellence. The best engineers will not be produced by a culture that favours the jock over the valedictorian or the prom queen over the math Olympiad champion. What's happened to Vivek? Was he right about American culture?
He went into the witness protection program after that. I don't believe he tweeted for 30 days after that. It went radio silent. Look, it's incredibly offensive. We pride ourselves to be the country of the right stuff, that kind of undefinable grit, determination, courage that gets things done. We're not a mediocre culture or society. We've gone through some speed bumps because of the woke nature of what happened and kind of these globalists trying to suppress really the backbone of the country, of every ethnicity and race we've got, this kind of grit and determination of the American working man and woman. I think Vivek exposed himself for a lot of what he really believes. It was not well received among MAGA, and he went into kind of the witness protection program. He got terminated at Doge. I think also for other reasons besides that. I think there was some, Elon's not looking for a co-star. And since he's not co-president, that's his deal. He's not looking for a co-star. And I think Elon's got his own way once he wants to run things. But Vivek is now announced he's going to run for governor, or very close, I think, to announcing for governor of Ohio. So we'll see how that turns out.
You mentioned Marco Rubio's comment about the end of the post-war international order. This is something that I know that you've been talking about for many, many years. Do you think we're witnessing a circulation of elites? Are we witnessing the replacement of the so-called globalist elites who have ran the United States, ever since the end of the Second World War, with more nationalist elites?
We would hope so. I mean, clearly, if we took the beach in 16, and since they stole it, we kind of held a bridgehead. Now we've got a second wave that's come up in, and now we're driving towards Berlin. We're breaking out of the hedgerows of Normandy and driving across the plains of France to take Paris and then eventually get to the Rhine and take Berlin. What do I mean by that? I mean that you're seeing populist nationalists with confidence. President Trump is owning these decisions. I mean, he's larger than life right now, because the Democrats are in such disarray, and he keeps driving decisions every day. There's executive orders on the economy, on tariffs, on immigration, on deportations, on virtually every vertical we have that thinks has to be turned around. You're seeing populist nationalist policies come in with people. What's fundamentally so important, I hope your audience doesn't miss the point, is you're seeing a geoeconomic and geostrategic not reimagining, a kind of a massive pivot in the United States. When we say the end of the post-war rules-based order, that means we don't want to be an empire anymore. President Trump is doing pretty obviously a hemispheric defense, whether that is sending Marco Rubio on his first trip. He didn't go to London. He didn't go to Brussels. He didn't go to Asia. He went to the Panama Canal to tell these guys, hey, we need you to step out here and say, one belt, one road's over, essentially kicking the Chinese out. We're taking our canal back. The canal all the way to Greenland is the Mahanian strategy of that the old British Empire had of, here it's going to be hemispheric defense. We're going to make sure the Chinese and Russian Navy can't connect in the Caribbean. We're going to make sure in some sort of partnership with an independent Greenland that we're going to have I think a base there, a big nuclear submarine base, so we don't have to depend upon Cregan in Scotland. And that is going to guarantee that we control the Greenland, Iceland, UK gap. And so Soviet submarines, fast attack and boomer, just can't come down from Murmansk or Archangel and come down and just get off the waters of the United States. We're also going to make sure in that we're positioned for the new great game of the 21st century. Britain and Russia fought the great game for 100 years in Afghanistan and Persia about war mortar port for the Russian Empire and for the defense of India, British India. The Arctic's the new great game, and it's a great power struggle. You've got the Chinese Communist Party's already up there, the KGB and the Russians already up there, the United States is going to be up there, and I think with Canada as a partner, but based off of Greenland. So you're seeing a Monroe Doctrine to look at our hemispheric defense. He's even talking about putting in some sort of iron dome that might secure it. Now, the technology of that and the cost of it still be determined. But if you look at that, coupled with trade and how he's looking at our market as a premium market, he's sending a very strong signal that the years of us spending hundreds of billions of dollars around the rim of the Eurasian landmass may be over. We will pick and choose those things we get involved with, right? And I think that's a very strong signal. One of the big signals, and this comes with the Ukraine and the coming negotiations, I think he's telling NATO and the countries of the continent and the United Kingdom, the Russian army is kind of your problem. You know, we're a naval power and the Russian Navy is our problem, and we're going to bottle it up in the Arctic. Or if it's not bottled up, we'll track it, you know, submarine to submarine. So we feel confident we got it. Russian army in that part of the Eurasian landmass, you know, near Kursk and Stalingrad, is we would strongly recommend it's not an English problem, but you know, Boris Johnson, you guys have at it, but it's not an American problem. It's not in the vital national. Those issues are not in the vital national security interests of the United States. I think it's a very strong signal, and I hope people in the powers that be in London are paying attention, because we can't afford it anymore. Remember, we're trying to work through a financial crisis here where we have $2 trillion of deficit. We have to borrow $2 trillion a year just to make it, and we got to stop that.
This doesn't look like isolationism. This looks like something else. And it's interesting, in his inaugural address, he talked about manifest destiny. Do you believe that if America isn't expanding, it's declining?
Not expanding and declining. What we've had here is managed decline by our elites. What you have to do is remove the globalist elites. We were under managed decline in every area, in education, in healthcare, trade, national security, our culture, borders, all of it. We lost our, you know, what they say is so important in this Ukraine situation, our sovereignty, our territorial integrity, and our self-determination of our citizens. That was the southern border of the United States. We've had 12 to 15 million invaders just on Biden's watch. I'm not talking beforehand. Beforehand, the number could get to 30 million. I don't even count those people anymore. What I count is what happened on Biden's watch. And it's extraordinary. Trump's reversed that. That's about make America great again. And there is a sense in this kind of new hemispheric look of hemispheric defense, particularly with partners like the Bolsonaros in Brazil and Milei in Chile or in Argentina, that this APEC conference that was in Chile, I think was an eye-opener for everybody, how deeply the Chinese Communist Party is in Latin America, in Central America, in Canada, really in Mexico. I believe his initial trade pushback was targeted at the Chinese Communist Party to focus on first Mexico and Canada, particularly around fentanyl, which is the new opium war against the United States, a chemical warfare attack essentially against us, losing 100,000 people a year. And the hidden costs, which nobody talks about, trillions of dollars of costs going forward for really people who've been turned into zombies. So if you're not dead, you're ruined to society. So President Trump's very aggressive on this. You are going to see, because he has in this idea, this concept of, hey, maybe we partner with Greenland. Maybe there's some way to, with an independent Greenland, we partner. He thinks that there's, and he's got pretty convincing evidence, both on the trade side and the national security military side, that it may make sense for Canada to partner up with us in some sort of forum. I don't know what that forum is. He keeps talking about it as another state. Maybe that's right. In Canada, not just the geoeconomics of trade and the really the one market, but as importantly, Canada's greatest defense, it was its northern border, which was frozen. Now that may be their soft underbelly. As the Chinese Communist Party in China becomes a major great power in the Arctic, they look very vulnerable. So President Trump is thinking, he's thinking downrange. And I think people should understand, in his 4 years when he was out of office, he took it very personally how it was stolen from him, but he planned and plotted every day, not simply the political comeback, but the policy comeback. What are we actually going to do? So he says, my revenge is a new golden age for America. Why his acolytes and people are looking at these verticals that we're driving to, but there's also something of holding people accountable for how this happened, of how we got in this situation. Not just President Trump and J6 and the Russia investigation, all that clearly has to be looked at. But I'm talking about decades and decades of rot in the United States. How did this come about? And how did the American taxpayers end up paying for it?
Let's talk about immigration. This is a huge issue. I think the number one issue facing the West today. Tom Homan, the border czar, said he's not happy with the numbers of deportations so far. There's been about 1,000 per day detainees being locked up. You know, under that projection, that's only 300,000 a year. That's not nowhere near tens of millions. It's not enough, is it?
Not tens of millions. Let's say start with the 10 to 12, which is enough. No, and think about it. I'm gonna give you worse news. This is the lowest hanging fruit. I mean, these are people with we haven't even gotten to the people that have orders to be deported. These are all quasi-criminals, right? They're either should be in lockup. For your audience, and our major metropolitan areas are all sanctuary cities, because the Democrats essentially control 20 of the largest metropolitan areas in the country, and then university towns in Aspen and Martha's Vineyard. That's where the Democrats really control. These cities have become sanctuary cities. One of the reasons that people are starting to vote for Trump, because they see the crime, they see the destruction of healthcare and education. Right? Your audience should understand of everything we've done, and Homa's doing a great job. They're all administrative warrants. You really can't go in and kick down a door and take 4 or 5 guys out. You got to nice in the door. If they don't want to answer, or they say, hey, I'm busy today, you have to go away. It's clearly not enough. And it's clearly not enough. The cost is very expensive. It's not, but Homan has a plan to do much more. I think once we get our people in the Senate, and this is why the Democrats are slowing down the confirmation process. They understand once we get control of the apparatus of the Justice Department and FBI, that will change. I think you're going to see a much more aggressive look. Homan's as aggressive as you can get. What he needs is some runway. He needs the ability to issue warrants. He needs, first of all, the ability to go into city jails, into state prisons, and take out the convicts there and send and deport them south. We need deals with these countries. Rubio, first trip goes to Central America. He's making those deals and getting those arrangements set up right now. That'll be very important. You'll see this ramped up, but your audience should understand this is not going to be easy, just like it's not going to be easy in the United Kingdom. If you're going to get 10 to 12 million, and I'm adamant, everybody's got to go. They all have to go back to their countries. We cannot allow a situation where people are allowed to come in here illegally and basically invited in by the government. And that's why, because this was not chaos. This was very well organized by Biden and the globalists. In fact, USAID, the charities and NGOs were a big part of this. Okay, all those people come under the heading of the UN's Global Compact on Migration are all part of this. And it's one of the reasons you see in Europe. I won't expose it, all the lies. I'm a Catholic. I'm a Roman Catholic. Catholic charities should be under investigation immediately. They took money from the government. They took money from USAID, plus the second collections in Catholic churches, and used it to invade our country to actually, and now they're out making videos telling illegal alien invaders how to avoid being rounded up, how to avoid going back. So the Lutheran Church, the Catholic Church, there's a Jewish organization out there, all of these NGOs, they're all guilty of the same thing of being being part of a conspiracy to and accomplish in invading our country. We have to investigate all of this.
Even the governor of New Jersey was talking about potentially hiding one.
No, and I worked with Phil Murphy at Goldman Sachs years ago. He's talking about hiding one. To me, any government official, and this is why I hope Homan gets a little more aggressive. I mean, I should say, he wants to be aggressive. I think what we have to do is let him off the chain. Homan wants to go in and arrest. If the mayor of Chicago is not going to open the city jails for us to take the prisoners out, if he's going to block and thwart by using city resources to stop federal authorities coming in, I think he should be arrested. If Pritzker, the big talking governor of Illinois, who's running for president, is going to use this as his platform, if he's sitting there saying that he's going to thwart every effort of the federal government to go to the prisons and take the prisoners out that should be deported, or to stop people that have orders, have already been ordered by, because over 1.1 million have already have deportation orders signed by a judge. They can go right away. We're not even to that crowd yet. We're still trying to get the criminals, which there's hundreds of thousands of criminals. If they block it, they should go to prison. I think, and Phil Murphy, is he going to hide somebody upstairs? Then you got to go to prison. We have to get hard with this. Homan wants to. We have Homan and Stephen Miller. There's about as hard as you can get.
So what's holding them back at the moment?
Well, I think number one, we haven't taken control of the Justice Department yet. Pam Bondi's not over there. Emma Bovee, we're kind of doing it in an interim basis, as happens on any administration. The Democrats are slowing this down. This is why the committees of jurisdiction voting out Tulsi Gabbard, voting out Bobby Kennedy were massive wins, right, with Pete Hegseth. They've been holding these things up, dragging their heel. Pam Bondi was voted on Monday night. She's just getting with the Justice Department. I think you're going to see a whole different sea change, but she's got another 15 people that also have to be Senate confirmed. Of the 4,000 that you get to come in and run the government, 3,000 just need a security clearance, basically, and they can start work tomorrow. The 1,000, and this is at the senior level, or all the key alphabet agencies, all have to go through Senate confirmation. When our government was set up, the House of Representatives was set up like Commons. The Senate was set up like the House of Lords. And what they thought was very important, since we didn't have a landed aristocracy, they wanted, and the Senate at the time was not directly elected by the people, so there's another safeguard against pure democracy. They wanted the Senate to be the Human Resources Department. They only gave the Senate two really official roles. You approve every treaty, and we don't want a lot of treaties, but if there's a treaty like in the war, I guess we want the Senate by 2/3 have to approve it, number one. Number two, you're the Human Resources Department. Every major cabinet official and underneath, and ambassador, and U.S. attorney, all have to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. That is a massive amount of people. That's what always slows these administrations down, particularly when you got the clock of the first 100 days. And remember, Trump's got about 100 days and then maybe 6 months until they gang up on him and try to slow this down. And people know this. So the lever that the Democrats use the most is slowing down the confirmation of judges, of U.S. attorneys, of ambassadors, all of it. So it's a tough battle. This is why we work 24/7. And quite frankly, our show, The War Room, one of our stocks in trade is supporting confirmation areas. We got Pete Hegseth over the top when there was an hour there on a Thursday about a month ago that Hegseth was about to be kicked to the curb, and Ron DeSantis is going to be brought in. And our audience said, no way. We do what we call fixed bayonets, just flood the zone with tens of thousands of calls, emails, text messages. We did it again on Bobby Kennedy, Kash Patel, and Pam Bondi, and Tulsi Gabbard. And, we're getting things approved. But it's so important for us hitting President Trump's marks.
What's your message to those protesters who are currently out on the streets in LA and other cities protesting against the deportations? They've got Mexican flags, they're burning American flags. What do you say to them?
Do more of it. I think it's great. I think the American people have to see this. Number one, I'm all for protests. I think protests it's a kind of an American tradition. As I remember in the Revolution, I think it's how we kicked off the Revolution, right? I'm a huge believer in it. But obviously you gotta, there are constraints you have to have on it. But I also think it shows you who people are. The protests in particularly in Southern California, is who's organizing it, and it's virulently anti-American. They're burning the American flag. They're waving the Mexican flag. I think people just ought to see more of it. I think the protest, at a point in time, you can't let it disrupt the functions of the ICE agents in actually doing this. And I think you'll get to that point eventually. But I think the protests are fine as long as the media is showing who's in back of it, and don't try to cover it up. Let the American people see. Let them see it. It's like the protests you see in London. When you have these big radical Islamic protests, I say cut the cameras on. BBC, these guys suppress it. The British people, because you're our mother country, one thing is the Anglo-Saxon community, the Anglosphere, has tremendous common sense built upon working class kind of experience. I'm always, like in Brexit or anything, this is what Churchill, on really backing Churchill's play with the same people that have backed, the same groups that backed Brexit, working class people in Midlands. The more information they have, the common sense kicks in, the kind of weigh and measure. This is my point. I want radical transparency. I want transparency who's in back of these protests. I don't have a problem with the protests. If they come and try to stop ICE, then something's got to be done about it. But we tried to show as much of the protests today as we possibly could, because I want our audience to understand what's going on. Particularly, they're waving Mexican flags and they're burning American flags. I don't know if these are the best. The people are not they're not sending their best, right?
Let's talk about Britain. Should Britain expect tariffs from President Trump?
I think it depends. It depends on, look, when Theresa May and the team came over, I think in February of 17, the first group we really had over in an organized way, I offered to sit in a room and cut a trade deal. I said, look, I'll sit here every day. I got to step out for other things, but we'll sit here 30 days and we'll have an amazing trade deal, this reciprocity. To say I got blown off is, they had no interest. Nah, don't want to do it. And I was thinking, I said, wow. These guys, they looked at Brexit as a problem and they didn't want to deal with it. A deal with the United States would have gone so far, but they didn't want to deal with it. Look, there's a very special relationship between our countries. There just is, right? There's a very strong bond between our two countries. One, obviously in the founding of the country, and we broke off, but there's still a deep bond underneath that. There's a deep bond for the 20th century, World War I, World War II, all the movies and the culture and just what people, what they think of the two cultures in the society and people that got to know each other. Then in the Cold War, you stood shoulder to shoulder. Then when President Reagan, our country got way off track, he came back, and Margaret Thatcher virtually at the same time, and was a great partner in taking down the evil empire, the great third victory of this alliance. So there's a deep bond there, and I'm sure President Trump understands that. I mean, look at how much time he spent in Scotland building those golf courses. He has a deep love. His mother comes from Scotland. He reveres his mother, right? He reveres his mother. This is why he's so drawn to Scotland. This guy is, holds England up as very special, in a very special relationship. I'm sure something would be worked out. Now, he's a tough deal guy, and he's going to cut tough deals. And I think like all of us, he's kind of a little bit shocked of Sir Starmer and others that it seems like your financial neck, since the bond market turfed out Liz Truss, and it didn't give Rishi Sunak, it kind of turfed him out too. You're still going. I believe you're kind of in a financial crisis, and one of the reasons you have a financial crisis is that your revenues from taxes, which are very highly taxed, don't come close to paying for your expenses. You don't have the luxury we have of being the prime reserve currency. That makes a huge difference. There's huge obligations going for that. You actually passed the baton to that after the destruction on the British Empire and the British people of two brutal world wars where you were at the tip of the spear taking casualties. So we kind of took it over from the pound. And it's tough, but you don't have that luxury. And what shocks me, and this gets back to the Ukraine situation, I just don't know what your leaders, the math they look at must not be the math that I look at. And I was the first American. My brother, Larry Kudlow, came out and said how Liz Truss's plan was so great. And I said at the beginning, this is financial suicide because she's not laying out the numbers. You can't go back to the Reagan play. You can't have a pro-growth supply side cut unless in today's world you lay out the math and say, here's exactly what we're doing. Here's what the cut does. Here's the industry is going to go to. Here's our projection, how you turn it around. When they were sitting there weeks and weeks, I'd sit on the show and go, I don't think it's the way the world works. And I keep telling people, the bond market has taken out more governments than the howitzer, okay? And in here, over the last year, the French assembly turfed out because of finance and trying to lay the cost of all this green madness on working class people. The Germans essentially turfed out for economics. The British, two governments, and I think a third on the ropes because of economics. The Canadians for economics, Biden really for economics. The G7, because we're too highly levered, and for too long, we haven't really taxed, and particularly here, haven't cut expenses and taxed the wealthy. We're in a jam and too much military expenditures. So I keep telling people, we have, I think, $300 trillion globally of debt. If you add it all up, households, students, little businesses, big businesses, local governments, your waterworks, schools, regional governments, national governments, international organizations. I think if you roll it all up, somebody says like 300 trillion, we're going to have the world's biggest margin call. And when we have that, it's going to be hell to pay. And so I tell everybody now, you better get in there. You better get serious about really husbanding resources, cutting expenditures, and figuring out what you can do on the revenue side. This is why President Trump's come up with this revolutionary external revenues, which he views as tariffs, fees, and duties, which is the way we financed our country up until the early 20th century. So there's huge changes coming on. I just feel my big fear for everybody is a financial crisis that is worse than 2008.
Well, just coming back to Starmer and Trump, because I think that's a really interesting relationship. I'd be incredibly surprised if it was anything like Reagan and Thatcher, but maybe we could be pleasantly surprised. Are there some concerns within the State Department, within the Trump administration, as to what Keir Starmer's doing in Britain, particularly around issues like freedom of speech? Just in the last few days, we saw a man, he pled guilty because he burned a Quran, and they said that was racially aggravating and so on. Is there concerns within the Trump administration that Starmer isn't taking freedom of speech seriously as one issue, or in other domestic policies where the Trump team are thinking this is crazy?
Well, first of all, I think President Trump looks at Nigel Farage as his relationship. And Nigel Farage
That's his stature.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's his stature. And I'm not trying to chop block Sir Starmer, is that I don't think it's a good signal. And President Trump has not said this to me. But on our show with Raheem, we're stunned that you could send Lord Mandelson. If you want to have a great relationship, I think I could probably come up with 20 people that I would pick to come over here that were not Lord Mandelson. And that is because of the horrible things he said about President Trump in the past, which he meant it, because he never thought Trump was coming back. So that's when you really say what you feel. Now he's over here, and the British people should understand he's groveling on Fox Digital. They wouldn't even put him on the channel. I think Murdoch may be too embarrassed. He's groveling on the digital, and it's embarrassing. Oh, that was a different time. I didn't know what I was doing. He's just groveling to try to get it. I think it's a terrible pick as ambassador. I think it sends a totally wrong signal to MAGA, because this guy stands for everything. He's against everything we've ever stood for. I just think it's a horrible, horrible symbol. And that, to me, is looked at as an action. President Trump is a people person. And I can see him and the prime minister getting along. I know he's excited about it. We'll have to see how it plays out. But I think when you talk about people where they really come from, it's Nigel, who's known the president for years, campaigned for the president. And Nigel is a big personality here among MAGA. People know Nigel. We went to, when Nigel was here for the inauguration, one of the best attended events in our entire inauguration over those 5 days. And folks got to understand, there were hundreds, if not thousands, of events. One of the best attended by power players was the one that was put on for Nigel. That's how highly he's regarded in the United States, because like Churchill went all over the country and gave lectures in those years in the wilderness. Nigel's been over here. He's gone to the small communities. He's done as many talks at small events and small venues as probably done in the Midlands. I mean, he's spent a lot of time over here talking to people, and people see a kindred soul. Remember, back to 2016, which we were working so hard on a Breitbart London with Raheem Kassam, and Raheem was actually working with Nigel at that time. Nigel told the BBC the next day, if it hadn't been for Breitbart London and Bannon and his team, they don't know if they could have pulled it off. I saw Brexit then as the predicate. That's when I told people, I said, we got this. If we can execute, and this is two months before I was brought into the campaign. One of the reasons I was brought into the campaign was just the thing that, Bannon was the guy that was on that Brexit thing. It's kind of similar. So there's many similarities of what's going on. I just think now you've really got to execute on Brexit. That's why I think the man in the moment in Nigel Farage is starting to meet.
So David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, he is here in DC this week meeting with Marco Rubio. And one of the things they're going to be discussing is this Chagos Islands deal. Now, to give a bit of context, Mauritius, which is a country in the Indian Ocean, wants to have sovereignty over a British territory, the Chagos Islands, where there's a US military base. And there's this deal which Keir Starmer looks like he's going to sign, in which Britain hands over potentially £18 billion to give them sovereignty over our territory with a US military base on. Would you advise President Trump to veto this deal?
It's a non-starter. I'm probably the only person you're going to interview that was supposed to dock there, and actually we had to get to the North Arabian Sea, so we just went by. Diego Garcia is a central asset. Back when I was there, it was I think it was still a British base. It is a central asset in the overall geostrategic outlook of the Indian Ocean strategy, in the Pacific, what they call, Indo-Pacific India and South Asia is now central to really the containment of China and stopping China from taking over the Eurasian landmass. This is a key asset under no circumstances now, because it's a naval strategy in the Indian Ocean. And when I was in the North Arabian Sea and Persian Gulf on a destroyer as a young officer back in, I think it was 79 and 1980, Diego Garcia was the only place you could stop. We have to have Diego. If you don't have Diego Garcia from the Australians, the Royal Navy that's there, and the American Navy, it's taken a major strategic. I'm actually shocked and stunned that it even could be conceived. When Nigel approached me a couple of months ago and walked me through it, I go, isn't that where Diego Garcia is? And they go, yeah. And I go, it's impossible. You can't give that up. That's the one base in that vast ocean. It's the one thing you can pull into, and it's under it's under us. We have it now, but it cannot be. And I'm sure President Trump will tell him under no situation. This is one of the things I'm kind of stunned about with the British and being allies on something that's so central. It's key to this strategy. Why this would even come up to gift. I think Mauritius is in hock to the One Belt, One Road. I mean, what the British East India Company did in building their network, which is kind of a predatory elite capture, predatory capitalism, then foreclose. You've got the elites in partnership with you forever. The CCP's kind of run a reverse British East India Company strategy where they have these countries from sub-Saharan to Latin America to sub-Saharan Africa to the Panama Canal to all the strategic. They took the Royal Navy's playbook. They read Mahan and said, and they said, hey, I want in. We're trying to reverse that. Diego Garcia is central to this, because if you give it up, you're giving it to the Chinese Communist Party, and we can never allow that to happen.
So just to be clear, you think President Trump will veto this deal?
I believe that Secretary Marco Rubio is going to inform the Foreign Minister Lamy that this is a non-starter. I would assume that's happened. If not, there's going to be a firestorm from the national. This is an issue that actually unites even parts of the MAGA more isolationist wing with thing, because we do realize that we're a Pacific nation. We've got the 3 island chains. We obviously want to do it with a navy instead of an army. We're never going to fight another land war on the Eurasian landmass. But this is central, and the hawks are adamant. I'm actually kind of stunned it's gotten this far. It's like there's something. I'm not saying there's corruption or kickbacks, but somebody has to check this thing out. There's no logic for why we would turn this over. Mauritius, it's not run by Jeffersonian Democrats, and it is in hock to the Chinese Communist Party. So why would we give the key asset in the middle of that vast desert? It's basically an ocean desert. It's like parts of the Pacific. The ocean is so vast. You have one little essentially refueling station and place to keep weapons, to restock, refuel, and then it's an atoll with a runway and a pier, right? You have a pier and a runway. It's not a garden spot. Why would you give that up? It's like incomprehensible.
Kemi Badenoch, she's the leader of the Tory party in Britain, the new leader. Are you impressed with her so far?
I'm just not impressed with the Tory party. I mean, it's so feckless. You had 12 years. You had so many opportunities. You had that one with Boris Johnson. All I've seen is just you've thrown away so many opportunities. You had Brexit. You had the opportunity there. There's been so many unforced errors, right? And in Rotherham, she's also part of that didn't want to confront some of these issues that are unpleasant to confront. I'm not saying this scandal.
The rape gang.
Yeah, the rape gangs. And remember, these are the granddaughters of the guys that stormed Normandy. Think about it for a second. Think of the generation these are the grandchildren of, or the children of, but mainly the grandchildren of. That's what I think about. I think all the lives that went in to ensure that England had its freedom, and to think that in these working class neighborhoods, these working class girls were these rape gangs. It went on, and people now admitting, oh, we were too afraid to do it. That's not an excuse, right? You have the authority. You have to do something. I think it's a deep scar. It's also, I think, you have to investigate that, and accountability and responsibility has to come up with that. So I see the Tory party, they were there for all that. I mean, Where are you after all those years of Tory rule? And here's what you find out. It's not really conservative. It's not really nationalistic. It doesn't really believe in the nation state. It wants to be everything to all these international organizations. You open your border, and everything they give you, they're just tapping you along. It's all just performance. Where they really say they're going to do it, then they don't do it. They say they're going to do it, then you get 1 million illegal aliens in every year, 1 million migrants. Where they say they're going to close them, they don't do it. They're always trying to play hide the football. And so that's why I think so many people get frustrated with politics, and they say all these guys lie. If you're going to come up, you got to be bold. And I think too many of the Tories, when I look at them, they just want to go along to get along. You're not there for a popularity contest. You're there to save your country. And your country's in a crisis now because for over a decade, you actually had power but didn't use power to actually save your country. You're in a jam right now. I can't tell you how much I think you have a massive immigration problem that you still don't want to address. We're going through it right now, and it's tough in the United States, and we're pretty tough hombres, okay? You have a huge issue in front of you have to address. You have huge financial issue in front of you have to address. Economic issue you have to address. And national security and strategy issues. And you have guys like Boris Johnson running around trying to be Churchill that have got you wrapped around the axle in Ukraine. Look, the commitments people are talking about, you signing 100-year treaties, you're talking about making a significant military commitment and a security over in Ukraine. Are you kidding me? The Great Britain, you're going to lose your health care, you're going to lose your education, you're going to lose it all if you don't get a grip on these people. And that's Tory and Labour. The established order, and it comes out of the City of London too, is I think driving the United Kingdom over an abyss. And when you said you've had Brexit and you're going to go over abyss, that means people in charge have not really said, hey, we have our own sovereignty. Let's do something like use our sovereignty.
Okay, it's been a very busy 2 weeks for you, I imagine, and for President Trump. Are you just getting started?
Oh, it's just started. I've been doing this every day like this for the last 12 years. It's great. If you're going to save your country, look, I could go out and do, I've been blessed by having financial resources. I could go do anything I want. This is what I want. I served my nation on a destroyer, for 3.5, 4 years, at sea in the Pacific and then up in the North Arabian Sea. Because my heroes growing up were Lord Nelson. Horatio Nelson was in the Band of Brothers.
Great man.
The great man. I've read everything about him. I've gone to all the memorials. I mean, I came from, my family's from Norfolk, Virginia. Very, all enlisted people or people that worked around the base. And
well, I'm from Portsmouth, and you can go to HMS Victory.
Portsmouth's the town that's named right there. Norfolk and Portsmouth are the two towns. Look, I was always inspired by Horatio Nelson. One of my favorite films, like Churchill's, is That Hamilton Woman, which has Vivian Leigh and Laurence Olivier. And when I talk about cultural bonds, I'm from the South, and the novel of the South is Gone with the Wind. And Vivian Leigh, who's British, plays Scarlett O'Hara. That shows you the bonds that we have that are very deep, and particularly with the American South. So it's no, I'm just getting started. I work 18 to 20 hours a day, 6-7 days a week, and I can't get enough. And I tell you, a guy that outworks me is Donald Trump. And people say, well, he plays golf. I said, hey, when he's on the golf course, he's making deals. He's got guys. He's on the phone. He's drilling guys. He's playing with people for a reason. This guy is in beast mode all the time. I've never seen anything like it. He is now, we haven't gotten peak Trump, but we're getting prime Trump. I think we're building to peak Trump, and it's so every day that I wake up, and I get up about 4 a.m. to check international news, to read the Guardian and the Telegraph and the Times and all the foreign papers early. When I get up, I tell people every day's Christmas Day, and I got a dozen boxes to open up, and there's going to be great things in each box. When you've been in the wilderness like we've been in the wilderness, and remember, they took all our we lost all of our bank lines, all of our credit cards. They deplatformed. I'm still banned in perpetuity on all the big platforms. You can't get me on Facebook, or you can barely, Google. They got all the bad stuff up front. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're banned on all of them, and but it's great. We were and President Trump, he was debanked, credit cards cut off, Melania, all of it, because they thought we were out of power, and they're all going to put us in prison so we don't have to deal with these people. It's the greatest. President Trump led the greatest comeback, not just in American history. He led the greatest comeback in all political history, if you read history. And the people around him that have been not just loyal to him personally, but loyal to this cause, understand that the American people responded to it, people throughout the world have responded to it, and you're just seeing the beginning of it. We're at the top, in baseball terms, we're at the top of the first inning. We got a long game ahead of us, and it's going to be a fight, tough fight. I tell people this. At the inauguration, I said, don't come here just to party and think that this is it. This is the what Churchill said about, I think, El Amin. Up until the inauguration, or November 5th, that was kind of the end of the beginning, right? And now we've got the whole rest of the story. And President Trump's here on the hero's journey. So we're here to support him and be part of that, like Nelson's band of brothers.
So this is the beginning of the end. Thank you so much, Stephen Bannon, for joining us.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe to the GBN America YouTube channel.